seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So
with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we face and that affects just about every facet of our lives. And I invite you, if you want to ask a question, if you have a situation you want to talk about, if you have an example you want to share, whatever the case may be, if you want to join the conversation, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Be happy to take your call. Today, the 18th of October, is a live broadcast. I'm here behind the microphone today, as I was last week. Week before that, I was away, so you were treated to a recorded broadcast. But we're here live tonight, and I can take your calls, and happy to do so. Another interesting week in our character-stricken land. Unfortunately, there's always a story to tell. You know, whether it be in our political sphere or economic sphere, there's always something going on in our culture that reflects how important it is that we get back to the notion of how important character is, and that we do our best to foster it, that we do our best to foster its development in our children, and that we do our best in our institutions and our social norms to reinforce those folks who are doing their best to be their best. It takes an awful lot of courage. It takes an awful lot of determination. And it takes an awful lot of faith in something. It doesn't have to be a religious faith. It can be a guiding philosophy of life. But it takes a lot of faith and commitment in something to be the kind of person that we all, I hope, aspire to be, especially in this permissive and entitled environment of ours. So, whatever the case may be, we want to get back to reinforcing as best as we can in our society those efforts that people make to be decent folks. We also want to call out those folks who exhibit the indecency among us. whose character is such that it causes us problems. We need to call these folks out. We certainly don't need to be electing them president of the United States or a senator or a congressperson. We certainly don't need that kind of leadership. And these days, it gets pretty depressing. It gets very depressing when you start really doing your homework and scrutinizing the character of the candidates that are before you. It's a pretty sad state of affairs. It's hard to find someone that you can say without much reservation has the common decency of character to be entrusted with what we need to be able to entrust to our public officials. You know, I've had the opportunity to do a substantial amount of travel in the past several years. And one thing you find in common with those relatively impoverished countries on the planet is you find rampant corruption, especially in the political arena. You find people on the take in one way or another, and always the folks who suffer are the folks that need their government support the most. They don't get the protection they need. They don't get the services they need. Basic human services get neglected. And those who have influence and those who have power, they do all right. That's the way it is in corrupt systems. Well, that's happening to us. It's happening to us before our very eyes. And there was a newscaster, I'm blocking right now on just who it was, on one of the networks that had a major meltdown. It was a commentator, I believe an economic commentator, who just went ballistic because of the rampant hypocrisy that is surrounding the budget debate right now. The fact that we are in such deep hock, such incredible debt, much of which was racked up to support some really ridiculous military enterprises that we had no business engaging in. And helped create an even more unstable world situation, political situation, than we've seen in a long time. But this person was just kind of going berserk about the fact that no political party really wants to deal with this. No individuals want to deal with this. Not even the president is showing leadership on this. The folks that should be paying a fair share are not. Those in the bottom tiers who have always borne the lion's share of the load are now barely eking out enough of a living to maintain the living standard that we've all grown accustomed to, or that we grew accustomed to years ago. Seems to be harder and harder to get. You have to remember, folks, well, many of you can't remember because many of you weren't around then, but there are several of us who can remember when living standards, much like we enjoy today, were available to us on a single person's income, on a single income, a primary breadwinner. And there was time left over for recreation and leisure. You know, these days you have two people grinding it out, and in some cases, depending on the kind of skills and the kinds of jobs that they are able to find, depending on the kind of skill level that they have and the kinds of opportunities that they've been able to find, even two people are barely eking out a living, working full time. Our quality of living has not gone up, it's gone down. And it continues to go down. And this is a trend that can continue. Worse than that, it's on top of mounds of debt. Now, I don't want to turn the entire program into a political show today, but the theme song that plays, I've explained this before. The reason I chose it, the reason I wrote the song with my wife, is just as the lyrics at the beginning say. The dreams some fought and died for, the dream that some have fought and died for, in my heart has become my own. And what is that dream? What exactly is that archetypal American dream? What is it? Well, I can sum it up for you. In my opinion, it's the ability of the individual person to prosper in the absence of externally imposed restraints and constraints. That's the American dream. Better yourself. Work hard. Do well. And you, if you're left alone and you have your own solid internal moral compass, you don't have to ascribe to a particular religion or a particular belief system. You just have to have a solid moral compass that not only enables you to live within some reasonable rules, but also to care about the welfare of others. So having that compass and having the desire to work hard, if you apply yourself and you're not interfered with, you're not hamstrung by external forces, then the sky is the limit for you. And not only that, in creating opportunities for yourself, you will inevitably create opportunities for others. And if you have a mind to be socially conscientious, with any power and influence that you accumulate along the way, even better for all. That is the American dream. And sadly, it is eroding under a mound of character disturbance. Now, I belong to one of many mental health professions. Not too long ago, there were very few disciplines within mental health. Today, there are so many counselors of one type or another, it's not funny. And it truly isn't funny, because the level of training and expertise varies quite considerably. And the perspectives vary considerably. We have this wide variety of helping professions these days. You would think, if there were that much validity to our approaches, and if we really had a handle on the real problems that people face today, that the numbers wouldn't be what they are with regard to untreated mental illness, with regard to lost time and lost productivity, with regard to these crazy events that keep plaguing us. How is it that we have such an explosion of professionals who claim to have the answer. And we're in such a mess. How could that be? How is it that our relationships are as tumultuous and unsatisfying as they are? That our marriages don't hold together? That our families don't hold together? How is it? How is it that we cheat one another so rampantly? How is it that a few can amass so much power and so much wealth and abuse that power so egregiously that they almost cause the collapse of the country? And then every other decent person has to mortgage their children's future to bail these SOBs out. How does that happen, folks? Just think about it. How does that happen? Now, I'm a big fan of some of the tried and true models. Say what you will, but millions of people have charted a better course in their lives as a result of some of these 12-step models. Now, I know that they're overused and they're overapplied in certain cases, but there is good. There is good in this model. And many people have benefited from such programs. And one of the things that we know about these programs is there's always that first step. That first step is to acknowledge what the problem is. I'm paraphrasing. I know I'm paraphrasing. But that first step is coming to admit. And those are the words involved in that first step. We admitted. So it's coming to accept and acknowledge and admit just exactly what the problem is. In the case of the alcoholics, they say we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. So that's the problem, defined in a nutshell. They can't help themselves when it comes to moderating their use of alcohol. They've admitted that. They've accepted that. They know that's the problem. And that's the first step. Well, we need to take that first step as a country and acknowledge where our problems stem. This is still the wealthiest country on earth. We have so much in the way of resources, and we have so much in the way of wealth. All of our economic problems are rooted in our social problems, and all of our social problems are rooted in our character deficiencies. So until we acknowledge what the problem is, until we take that first step, until we say, there's a character crisis in this country, and it starts early. And it's fueled by a culture where attitudes of entitlement, permissiveness, and relativism are rewarded. They're promoted. And that's why our greatness has eroded and continues to erode and will continue to erode. Now, there are those in the 12-step movements who say that no one comes to that first step without hitting rock bottom. Well, it may just have to be that we do that as a nation. We may just have to hit rock bottom. It may have to get so bad that we basically can't see up before we start to crawl. I hope that doesn't happen, but it may have to be that way. And I don't know how bad it would have to get. I know that the more we lie and pretend that things are okay, the more likely it is that the fall when we have it is going to be really substantial, really going to be hard. The bottom will be very low. It'll be a really deep bottom to hit, that hitting bottom, that we'll have to do as a country. Just one example, we have numbers that the government gives us about employment. And right now, supposedly, the unemployment numbers are supposed to be really pretty good, in the 5.7, 5.8% area. Well, under normal circumstances, this would be great news if the number really reflected anything. The real problem is in the lie that the numbers hide. Disturbed and disordered characters not only know how to cook the books, they like cooking the books. They like creating illusions. They like the lie. They would climb a tree to tell a lie as opposed to stand on the ground and tell the truth. So we have people who know that the numbers are misleading because so many people have simply stopped looking for work. And also, those people who have managed to find work are not finding anywhere near the work that they're capable of doing or that they may have been doing before. And they're not getting compensated the same, either in benefits or in pay. So really, our economic situation is bleak. And a lot of people know it's bleak. And it needs some really tough remedies. But nobody wants to fess up to that. Now, believe me, I'm not I'm not pointing fingers, I should say, at any one particular party in particular, because they're all guilty. They're all guilty. Money has so corrupted the system. People are so beholden to their benefactors that the public interest it just can't be served. And once again, it all comes down to character. It comes down to whether or not somebody can be bought, is willing to be bought. Accedes to that notion that they have to win to flex any muscle, and they have to do whatever they have to do to win. So if they need to give their benefactors whatever it is their benefactors want, so they can be assured of re-election, then they'll do it. It's just truly ridiculous. And it won't get better until we take that first step. We've got to acknowledge what the problem is. Now, I've spent a lot of time as a therapist, many years, focusing on the character issue at an individual and a relationship level, counseling couples and individuals who have been in toxic relationships, individuals who are the cause of toxic relationships. I've made that area of focus my life's work for a long time. But the problem goes beyond individual relationships. This problem is affecting everybody. We're only great as a nation when we're good as people. It's our character that matters. That's why I titled this program, Character Matters. It matters a lot. It affects everything. It affects everything we do. And my part in that is trying to get the word out through my books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People. Proud to say, an international bestseller. It will now be close to 20 years in print. In September of 2016, In Sheep's Clothing will have been in print for just over 20 years. A pretty unthinkable circumstance. And by the way, it hasn't lost its popularity. In fact, it only continues to steadily gain in popularity, which is just, it's truly phenomenal. And then my other book, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age. My follow-up to In Sheep's Clothing and a more in-depth study of our character crisis and what we can do about it. And most especially, what to look for in the way of help when you're seeking help. Because this is the biggest question of all the questions that I get. The number one question, the number one thing that people write me on the order of a dozen times a week at least, because I get hundreds of emails, but dozens of times every week, the leading question is, can you refer me to somebody who gets it with respect to this character disturbance issue? Because I'm living with somebody who I know has a character disturbance, maybe even a character disorder. And I just can't take it anymore, and I need some help. And I've sought help in the past. And the therapist only got manipulated. And nothing got any better. Or my spouse or my partner said all the right things and did all the right things ostensibly to make a favorable impression, and then nothing really changed. So can you refer me to somebody who really gets it so that I can maybe get some real help? That's the number one thing that people write me. I've gotten thousands of such requests. So one of the things I tried to do in Character Disturbance is to tell folks just exactly what the right kind of therapy looks like when you're dealing with somebody who's got an impaired or disordered character. And that information alone has proven helpful to a lot of folks. So those two books are ways that I try to get the message out, try to make a difference. And then, of course, my book for the Christian faith community called The Judas Syndrome, about how faith, genuine faith, can really help transform a person and help transform their lives. And how our lack of faith is betrayed in our actions, just like Judas betrayed his lack of faith with his actions. So those are the principal ways that I try to do it, get the message out. And then, of course, this radio program. And then my blog, one of the most popular blogs out there, manipulative-people.com. That's www.manipulative-people.com. A resource for folks who have been in or are struggling with a difficult relationship. We just started a new series of articles this past Friday. It's a kind of a follow-up to some articles written before on toxic relationship survival. And it's going to be heavily focused on the key variables involved in someone's personal empowerment, especially after they've been in a relationship with a disturbed or disordered character. There are really two aspects of empowering yourself. One has to do with really knowing what makes certain people tick, what they're really all about, not what you've been told time and time again with some old, tired, worn-out traditional metaphors about why people do the things they do, but what really makes people tick. And especially what really makes the disturbed and disordered characters among us tick, what they're really like, how they really operate, how they really think, how they go about getting the better of you. Understanding that, having a proper framework, getting it when it comes to understanding them and what they're likely to do and how to spot their tactics and how to avoid being victimized before it's too late, that's one key to personal empowerment. That's one major key. So this series of articles that I'll be posting on the Manipulative-People blog will be geared toward that, illustrating that. There'll be some case examples, altered, of course, to preserve anonymity, that will demonstrate just exactly how you go about adopting the kind of framework that will have you be a better judge of character, spot tactics before you get taken advantage of, and empower yourself in that way. And then the second key to personal empowerment is something that is really a touchy subject to talk about because it involves an honest self-reckoning. Now, all of us, even the non-character disturbed folks among us, we all have aspects of our personality that that make us vulnerable, that make us more vulnerable to either hooking up with, being seduced by, or being exploited and taken advantage of by a disturbed or disordered character. Now, sometimes those traits of personality are really admirable traits. For example, some manipulators are very good at scoping out the ultra-conscientious among us. Those individuals with really strong consciences that don't like to hurt other people, that take their responsibilities seriously, that feel guilt quite easily when they do the slightest thing wrong. Maybe they feel it even too easily, etc., etc. And these are the very qualities that disturbed characters will exploit. The social parasites among us, they love the responsible among us. Why? Because if they hook up with the responsible party, they can continue to be a parasite. They don't have to do any work. They can exploit the good nature of the person they've hooked up with. So we all have aspects of our makeup that make us vulnerable. And some of those aspects are not bad things. But unless we reckon with ourselves, unless we know who we are, and that's the second piece of empowerment, unless we know we've done I'll go back to the 12-step model here. There's one step in the model that has to do with making a searching and fearless moral inventory. It's part of what the adherents call an honest self-reckoning. It's kind of like an examination of conscience. It's where you take that serious, unbiased, unvarnished look at yourself. And you size up your strengths and your weaknesses for the purpose of empowering yourself in the future to perhaps not be victimized again, and to perhaps be stronger, to be better. That's the second aspect of personal empowerment. Now, I said that that's a particularly touchy area because a lot of people, especially folks who have been really badly victimized in a toxic relationship, when they go through this kind of introspection, it kind of feels sometimes like you're blaming the victim. And that isn't it at all. An honest self-reckoning can't be self-blame. And if you're working with a therapist, and the therapist is helping you to sort through your own personality makeup issues, that can't be done with the thought that blame is being cast on you for the victimization that you received in your toxic relationship. But in order to be less vulnerable, and in order to be maximally empowered, you do have to take a serious look at yourself, too. So the two keys are seeing the no-goodniks out there accurately. That's key one. Knowing what they're really like, how they really operate, what they really think. And shrugging off, casting away some of those tired, worn-out notions that came out of our classical psychology paradigms about why people do the things that they do. Casting off those old notions and getting a more honest appraisal of what makes certain no-goodniks tick, what they're all about, really, how they get the better of you. And then key number 2 is taking a good, hard, solid, and caring look at yourself, appraising your natural strengths and weaknesses, sifting through your vulnerabilities, and working to solidify some of those weaknesses, to gain some skills that you might not have. And those are the two keys to personal empowerment. This is how people make it better than before, as opposed to being defeated by their experience with a toxic relationship. So that's what my book Character Disturbance is all about. In large measure, that's also what Judas Syndrome is about. And it's also what a book that will be coming into print, hopefully, in the next couple of months, and that I'll have some announcements about, that we have tentatively titled. And I'll share that with you in a moment. But we have a new book coming out that's going to be very much geared to this whole notion of how we got here. That's the tentative title of the book. How did we get here? And there's a double meaning in that title. It's meant for all of those folks who are either in or who have barely survived a toxic relationship, who's doing that kind of reflection and saying, oh my God, how did it come to this? How did this happen? How did I get here? And then the book is also geared toward answering the question about how we got here as a society. How did everything fall apart so quickly? Why is it that it takes so many tries to find a relationship that's wholesome and healthy? Why is it that it takes so much work and effort to find the decency that was once so commonplace? That's what this book attempts to answer. And it's got a lot more focus than any of my other books on the road to personal empowerment. So I'll be having more information to give you in the not too distant future about that, as well as more information to give you about workshops that I'm going to be doing starting in January with cross-country seminars. I don't know the locations just yet, but I will know very soon, and I'll be posting that information on the manipulative-people.com blog. Also, I neglected to mention before, in addition to the manipulative-people.com blog, I also blog for the Psychology, Philosophy, and Real Life blog at www.counselingwith2lsresource.com. That's counselingwith2lsresource.com. You can find an article every week on that blog as well. So literally thousands of articles out there, all designed to help empower folks, help them understand this character-disturbed age we live in. And my books, of course, and that's what it's all about. Well, the lines haven't been too busy tonight. Maybe it's because I've been just blabbering on here and there. But I know that as the series gets going that we've just launched, and as people share their examples, that there's going to be a pretty robust discussion on the manipulative-people blog. So I encourage you to mosey on over and check out the articles, check out the resources there. And if you don't have them, get my books, In Sheep's Clothing, Character Disturbance, and The Judas Syndrome, and the new books when they come out. And I'll be having more information. I'll be announcing about that in just the next couple of weeks. But if you want to give us a call, if you have a question you want to ask, if you want to share a story or two, or you just want to make a general comment, maybe you want to take issue with me about something, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. You know, we've had some really great calls on this program. Last week in particular, we had a great call from someone who has many. I've gotten this same thought expressed from so many people who say basically that there is no help out there for people with personality or character disturbances. Well, that is wrong for two reasons. Number one reason, the biggest problem with the help out there is the nature of the help. By far, too many helping professionals are still aligned with perspectives and models of treatment that are not appropriate for dealing with character issues. That's the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that you go to a doctor's office or to a counselor's office and they're not equipped all too many times to deal with the problem that you're bringing them. And then, cop out of all cop-outs, they'll offer you the lame excuse, well, these kinds of problems just can't be helped. Well, it's not true. But you certainly can't help them. You surely cannot deal with them effectively with the traditional old models that were designed for an entirely different set of problems than the problems that we face today. So that's problem number one. And I am so grateful to the caller for even bringing up the topic last week so that I could speak to that issue. And the second error in that statement about there's no help for these kind of issues has to do with the point that I make in my books, In Sheep's Clothing and Character Disturbance, and that is character disturbance exists along a continuum, much like the autistic spectrum disorders. There are individuals who are fully autistic, and sad to say, in our day and age, for individuals who are fully autistic and severely autistic, all of the methods that we have are minimally effective. Sad to say. However, these disturbances exist along a continuum, and there are some methods that have been specifically designed to treat the symptoms of this problem. And in those cases where someone is at the low end of the spectrum and the symptoms are mild, with early intervention and intensive intervention, with the techniques that we know work, many individuals on the spectrum can go on to lead darn near normal lives and do well socially. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's hard to tell them I had an experience, a very, very personal experience, with members of my own family and friends and relatives. And I'm thinking of one particular friend, a neighbor, who struggled with two children on the spectrum, one severely on the spectrum, one not so severely on the spectrum. And the one child who got all the proper intervention from very early on, from pre-K all the way through school, I had the occasion to meet him a couple of years ago on a leave from college, and it was remarkable. It was totally remarkable. You would not know this young man if you didn't know that he was on the spectrum. You wouldn't know him. You would never know it. You would think he was perfectly normal. And that's the way it is with character disturbance, too. Fortunately, there are very few folks who are at such an extreme, the full-blown psychopaths or sociopaths at the extreme end of the character disturbance spectrum, the truly malignant narcissists. There are so very few of those folks at that end of the spectrum where even the best of methods would have a tough time making a dent. Fortunately, that's relatively rare. More often, individuals with character disturbances lie somewhere else on the spectrum. So the real key is whether or not they get the intervention that's going to do them any good. And its face looks entirely different. It's not your traditional insight-oriented psychotherapy or talk therapy. It's different. And so the biggest reason why folks have such discouragement and will repeat the untruth of the matter so often, the popular misconception that when it comes to personality and character disturbances, you can't do anything about them anyway. The biggest reason for that is they've unfortunately either heard or had personal experience with professionals not equipped with the skills, either not familiar with, maybe they're even deliberately non-aligned with the kind of perspectives that we know can make a difference. There are all too many folks out there still who are overly aligned with traditional models that were never, ever meant to deal with the phenomenon of our age. So once again, I'm really grateful to the caller last week because he got me really riled up because he sounded like a guy who has wrestled with his own character issues and was looking for some help. And I hope that he reads the books, and I hope that he seeks the help, and I hope also that if he's not able to do so, that he thinks about availing himself of the kinds of consultations that I do. I do 3 kinds of consultations that have been extremely rewarding because I don't do a regular practice anymore, a regular therapy practice anymore. But there are 3 kinds of consultations that I do. I do what I call adjunctive consultations, which are in tandem with someone or a couple working with a therapist already. They're doing their therapy, But because either the therapy doesn't seem to be rolling along, or because the therapist is unfamiliar with the kinds of special approaches that need to be used when character disturbance is involved, they seek my consultation on the case. And so I do these collateral consultations in conjunction with the therapy that folks are getting. I also do consultations with therapists themselves to strategize, to acquaint them with the principles and methods, to basically show them, if they haven't been to one of my training workshops, how it works when you're dealing with character disturbance and using the methods that everybody's been taught about, and some people even think they know how to use, but don't really know how to put into practice. And so I do that kind of consultation. And then lastly, I do individual consultations with folks who are not seeking formal assessment or therapy per se, but they're well enough grounded in the principles that I advance in my books, in my online writings, but they still have questions. They're still having some difficulty putting principles into practice, and they want to get better. Or perhaps they're trying to pick up the pieces after a toxic relationship. Perhaps they're a toxic relationship survivor that is looking for the resources to get on with their life and is looking for some guidance and some support. At any rate, I do individual consultations too, and that has been very rewarding. I do these consultations via Skype and FaceTime primarily, but I'll also do them occasionally via telephone and also via email exchange on rare occasions where either the internet or phone is not available, but that's not very often. So I invite you to take a trip on over to the blog, pay a visit there. At manipulative-people.com. You can also wander over to counseling with 2 L's, counselingresource.com, and take advantage of the articles that are there, especially those of you visiting the manipulative-people.com blog. Take advantage of the new series of articles that I'm going to be writing on getting yourself put back together, building some strength, empowering yourself, sorting through things after you have either found yourself in or have finally decided to exit from a toxic relationship with a disturbed or disordered character. You won't want to miss that article. That series of articles. You certainly won't want to miss the contributions of the commentators who have so many examples and firsthand experiences to share. And I invite you also, again, to tune in to Character Matters here every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, 4 p.m. Pacific, for another edition of the program that addresses what I consider to be the defining issue of our time. Let's all help make this place great again, the right way, not in a ostentatious, Trumpish way, but in the way that really matters, by restoring the character of ourselves and therefore our country. That'll make us great again. So until next week, I'm Dr. George Simon. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you again next Sunday night on Character Matters.